Our theme during this Lenten season is one of the messy middles in the words. If we look at Congress, what we hear and what we see is you're either for us or against us. The role of collaboration, of working together, seems to have been set aside. You can see right now that there's some dilemma in terms of their dialogue. Well, we're looking at everything in between. So, as we studied the scriptures, Jesus' ministry was rooted, of course, in relationships. Relationships that disrupted political and religious divides of his time. Here was a woman who was challenging relationships at that time. She chose to come up and confront Jesus about her needs. That's a shock of the day. Well, here's another shock of the day. Friends, I'm here to say that I think Martha got a raw deal. Now, as you know, I love to entertain. I love to cook. And this isn't easy. I mean, for example, you look at Thanksgiving. Every Thanksgiving for the last 36, 38 years, there's a group of us that have gotten together. We used to go up into the mountains. Now we go to their homes down in the Monterey Peninsula area. Sometimes they come up to us. All year long, we're thinking about what we're going to cook. So this past year, I cooked twice-baked potatoes. Now, there's a recipe for those who would like in the narthex there. This is not an easy thing to do, but it's relatively easy. You know, you puncture it, you cover it, well, of course you have to wash it, cover it in butter or in olive oil, and you bake it at 375 for about 50 minutes. And then you cut it in half. And you scoop out the inners, and you add sour cream and butter and chives, and also perhaps some thyme. And then you put it back into the potatoes. And then you put them in the oven again, this time maybe 400 for another 25 or so minutes. But that can be done, of course, on the day that we serve. But I've cleaned those potatoes before we left home. And I've also made several toppings because I like people to have choices to put those toppings on those potatoes. So one of the toppings is, you know, you've heard of loaded potatoes, so it's butter, sour cream, chives. And the other one is a Spanish one. And so I use my secret signature Safeway brand salsa, fire roasted salsa. I don't know if you've ever tried this, but this is I wouldn't call it exactly mild. It's got a little kick, but it has a really wonderful taste. We put it on eggs, we put it on different things. You don't know what you're going to learn here when you come to church here. So at any rate, there's that. And then, of course, shredded cheddar cheese. And then, of course, that salsa. So that's for the Spanish flavor. And then I also have an Italian topping. And the Italian topping includes fire-roasted tomatoes that are chopped up, fresh basil, thyme, and it also includes some Turkish oregano that I get from World Spice Company. That's my go-to spice company. And we mix that. So the person, one of our guests, has the chance to use any one of those toppings. And as what I had offered to them was the ability to have several toppings on different parts of their potato. So you can see, this isn't an easy task for Martha. Now we know that Thomas, the apostle, was one who came in early and often kind of connected to people so that Jesus would know where he was going to stay, where he was going to be fed, perhaps even with whom he would be speaking. And so Martha probably had time to get the house ready. Now, this is where the story fails us. Because while I'm working and slaving away in the kitchen, Georgie is out there having a glass of wine of the New Covenant with our friends, listening to their stories and everything. But wait a minute, we know that that's not true. Because long before we have people into our house, she is going into every room making sure that it's acceptable. She's working diligently to have everything all set up by the time the guests get there. I suspect that Mary did this as well. That Mary probably was working diligently with Martha to prepare that home for Jesus' arrival and the disciples. So we can guess that they worked far more than just the presentation of the food. So we look at that group of working. How many of us have entertained friends? How many of you have entertained friends? Is it an easy task, folks? No, it isn't. So let's hear it for Martha. Rah, yay. The radical middle. Well, we also recognize that maybe it wasn't just Mary and Martha. Maybe it was some of the people that worked with them in their house. Maybe even perhaps it was volunteers that came over. Now, I don't like forced choice tests. You have to choose one or the other. And that's what Jesus gave us. But you know, Jesus is always, at the same time that he's radically challenging us, he's often asking us to look beyond the obvious. So, last week, there were several nuances of learnings. Last week, when I presented on Sunday night of the trip to look at the Underground Railroad through the Mississippi area and the Natchez Trace, our Paul told us of a story. He's just retired from a very stressful IT software company job. And at the end of the day, in order to help himself, he would send a note to somebody who had done something for him or for the group. And it was a thank you. And it was a way of helping him transition from the stress of that day to going home with a good feeling for himself. And he knew that it also helped others. You see, this is where Martha went wrong. She came in with resentment instead of, I'm feeling underprivileged here, or not even appreciated. This is what Paul is inviting us to say, is to say thank you. And then there's our Donna on Sunday night, who is mobility challenged. With Georgie, she wouldn't be walking, but she would be doing stretching exercises. Now, Donna often needs help at the grocery store, and she frequently tells us stories where people have helped her get to her car and to put the groceries in there. And she's able to say thank you and carry on conversations of gratefulness. She also, sometimes that turns into questions or discussions about faith. We use these questions to open the door to understanding. I think Martha opened the door to understanding. Mary perhaps said, and this is what I've been learning. And then there's our 103-year-old Millie. And I'm talking about the Underground Railroad, and our 103-year-old Millie says, well, my family had 2 homes a part of that Underground Railroad in New York. And if you remember that history, they passed the law that enabled slave catchers to follow them all the way up to Canada and recapture those enslaved people. And she said that the people who they were saving would hide in one of the houses while they were searching the other house. And then when they would go over to the next door, they would have some way in which they could get them over to the other house. She said they never lost a person who went through their Underground Railroad station. Each person helping. Maybe the gift here doesn't stop at just that conversation with Martha and Mary. How many of us afterwards have gotten our glass of wine of the New Covenant, sat around in the living room after everybody's gone home, the dishes are in the dishwasher, and we're sharing about what happened in the evening, or in that meeting, or in that visit, if you will. And what did we learn, and what did we hear, and what stood out? Maybe there's more to that story. And then, finally, the recognition is that every one of those members of that household were needed for that simple visit. Just like all of you are needed for the ministry of this church. Now, we have a special calling today, and we want you to be able to step forward in it. It is Pie Day. Somebody made pies. We have to say thank you. Somebody needs to buy those pies. We need to say thank you. Somebody needs to eat those pies. We need to say amen. So, wherever you are in the journey of entertaining and being entertained, you're welcome here. Amen.